Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of AI Insiders with AI Marketers Guild. I'm your host, David Berkowitz, and I'm here with someone who's up on my short list of favorite Davids. I know a lot of us people, but David Kohl through I got to know very well through his work at TrustX, and really just one of the most thoughtful folks looking at areas like trust and privacy and areas that in like are often deprioritized by too many and he's been at the forefront of it for quite a while, and so now he's running Morgan Digital Ventures and came to me with some ideas for creating some research and trying to see what folks in the marketing and ad industry are really thinking about and how they're using AI. And so you might have seen me share this at different points with the AMG community. Maybe some of you actually took this survey, and so wanted to welcome David. I hear what you're up to, why you did this, what you found, and as always, for those who haven't been here before, haven't been here in a while, just keep this super interactive and there are even some like we could do some live cuts of the data. So anything that anyone wants to go and really like dive into and explore further, we'll have a fun discussion. So welcome, David.
Thank you, sir. And I think the feeling is mutual. You were also on my list of favorite Davids,
Wow.
so it's a David love fest.
Okay, I won't ask where I am on that list, but I'm
Uh,
glad to be anywhere on there.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I first off, thanks for having me on. This is gonna be fun, and we'll do a little talking at the beginning. And I'll show you some data, and then I want to reserve plenty of time to play around with the tool in more of a Q&A style. So we'll definitely reserve time for that. I think the catalyst here started. I left TrustX last fall and quickly got back into the market because AI seemed like this new transformational catalyst that, of course, everyone's embracing it one way or another. And I wanted to find out, like, where are people? Like, where are we on the maturity of playing around to actually getting value? My consultancy focuses on growth and differentiation. I help marketers, agencies, publishers uh, create a distinctive value and get value out of that. That turns into economic growth, revenue, and profit. And so I saw AI as this catalyst, as a tool, but wasn't sure where people really are in terms of adopting. What I heard really were three things anecdotally. A very small number of companies, and frankly, they were mostly ad tech and martech companies, were talking about AI in terms of a measurable goal. Right? We figured out X is going to help our company, and we have initiatives going on, which is great. That's the gold standard in getting value from a new technology. But that was a tiny, tiny number of folks in my anecdotal conversation sample. Most of the folks I was talking to back in the fall were saying anything from "I'm paralyzed," like I literally don't even know where to start, and I'm kind of just sitting back and watching others. And then the other group was, "Yeah, we're playing with AI," or as I like to put it, "We're throwing AI spaghetti against the wall to try to see what sticks." But very few were really organizing around a goal, a differentiation, and a competitive advantage. And so the catalyst for doing the survey was: are the anecdotes what the rest of the market's saying, or just the David Cole sample? So that's where we started. Um, what I'm going to do, because I'd rather not just talk, I'd rather show you, is I'm going to share my screen. So let me share with you a couple of takeaways. I'll start with the stuff that, at least to me, wasn't surprising, and I don't think it'll surprise anyone else. Um, the first thing that wasn't surprising is that whether you're an agency, brand, consultancy, platform, publisher, which were the predominant responses to the survey, folks are somewhere between experimenting with AI and maybe the very early stages of implementing it as a production day-to-day tool. Um, Again, not surprising. This survey was conducted between middle of January and the end of February. And so, that makes sense for a month or two ago. And I think practically speaking, it's probably the same even today. So, not surprising. Everyone's between experimenting and implementing. The second thing that I didn't think was very surprising is when we asked, where do you rate yourself in terms of maturity by function with not using on this chart on the left in the gray and getting actual measurable ROI in the orange on the right? Not surprising is that content is king. And that's kind of like the OG for AI, right? We all used it for writing. We started playing around for image generation. So again, not super surprising that content was at the top of the list of where folks are getting the most benefit from AI. The third thing that I also felt was really not surprising is that to the extent folks are measuring some kind of benefit, if you look at this top section, how AI impact is being measured, time saved and efficiency was the top response. About half, a little less than half, said that if they're measuring anything at all, it's that they're getting efficiency and time saved out of AI. Again, not surprising. I want to come back to the maturity by segment because this is where I got my first head scratch. So you'll notice that platform companies, these are MarTech and ad tech platforms primarily, rated themselves as perhaps a little further ahead. We're now implementing. Again, not surprising. But what did surprise me is that agencies rated themselves so high on the maturity curve. And I have two theories here, and they're just theories. One theory is that agencies, sorry, are under tremendous pressure from their clients to stay ahead. And so they're investing, they're organizing, and they are themselves driving AI tools in that implementation phase because of their competitive pressure. That's one theory. Another theory is that agencies are maybe having a little bit of drinking the Kool-Aid. They sort of believe that because they're playing around with AI, that they're ahead of the curve relative to other organizations. And that second theory I thought of because if you look at the third line here, the 16 companies that responded in the consulting line,
Mhm.
consultants also have pressure from their clients to show that they're advanced, to be ahead of the curve. And consultants seem to be rating themselves further behind. In fact, of the group, the most behind. And so the question becomes, are consultants maybe too honest relative to agencies who are maybe a little bit drinking the Kool-Aid? There's no way to know. And we didn't ask people for long form explanations of all their answers. There are some insights that I can show you here on what people said, but at the end, we just have theories. Not that said, we do think that it was a little surprising to see agencies at the top. And when we get into the dialogue, since I know there were a lot of marketers on this call, I would love to hear how people think about their agencies with relative to the maturity of usage of AI. So that was one of the surprises. Another one is actually come back to this chart I showed before. Remember, I said time saved. 45% of respondents say that that's the impact that AI is making. A quarter of respondents said that we are not actually measuring the impact of AI. Now, there's a phrase I'm sure everyone heard, what gets measured gets done. And so if you're not measuring meaningfully, you may not be getting anything done. And I think this comes back to that anecdotal evidence I had early on that folks are kind of using AI, but they're throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, as opposed to focusing on differentiation, focusing on something distinctive that can drive economic value.
Well, and I mean, just on the measurement front, I've been so curious about this for years because the first the first metric that started to pop with AI usage was this time spent, right? And even there, I'm not sure like how many actually take that through to real efficiency metrics, especially if you're not somewhere like in big tech or somewhere that's like laser focused on that. And so so I even wonder, like, with the metric that most people are reporting and saying that like this impacts, like, you know, can they do anything with this, right? Like, what's actionable based on this, as opposed to something where you actually see some results come in, right? And so it's
I
like, what?
argue, Dave, that the last three, customer engagement, revenue growth, and cost reduction, are results that should be measured and should come from being more efficient at doing your job, being able to get insights around customers. Um, let's come back to something for a second. Um, Ad measurement. So many of us are in marketing and media, and ad measurement was rated the second most I'm not using, right? The light gray bar on the left. And ad measurement is a great way for AI to show its capabilities. It could take
Mhm.
massive data sets and look at insights and use those insights to drive, where were my, here it is, to drive things like better customer segmentation or to run media more effectively, which would result in revenue growth. So to me, there's a circle here of, we're not really focusing on some of the differentiated activities, and it shows up in the functional maturity under things like ad measurement, media planning. If I were to just compare agencies to brands, on the left side, you have 14 agencies. On the right side, you have 12 companies in the brand or advertiser category. And you'll see here again that agencies are using it for content creation, so are brands, but to a lesser degree. When you get back into measurement, you would think the agencies would be, using it more regularly for ad measurement. You see, it's fourth on the list. We're not seeing client side do that much at all. If I go back to segment maturity, let me pull back. You can see that these were the ones we showed before. If I go to role, you can see that, well, we pull out the founder role. There's only one respondent there. This way. Here we go. This is how the roles in the companies thought about themselves. So there's some interesting little insights from the here. Bill, do you have a question, or are you just talking in the background?
No, it's a webinar.
All right, I'll mute.
Yeah, we're not. Still not yet. They're handing it.
All right. Let me cover the last thing on the insights here. And then what I'd love to do is open the floor to ask questions about the data, and we can go through it. The last thing on the insights was the skills, resources, and budgets were getting in the way of AI adoption. On the one hand, yeah, it sort of makes sense. Everyone's budgets are tight, there aren't enough people. But I would have thought that vendor choices and complexity, which was only noted by 40% of respondents, would have been the highest barrier, particularly since a lot of folks talked about being a little paralyzed, a little stuck. There are, I don't know, what do we think, hundreds, David? Hundreds of companies that call themselves powered by AI today. And I would have thought that one of the major barriers, or much higher, was just the sheer choice and not knowing who to hang your hat with. But in fact, it's actually internal skills, resources, and budgets.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are kind of the big ahas that I found. Uh, the tool lets us take a look at say how one segment compares to another. So this is the all respondents relative to brands and advertisers. I can do that same look at the functional maturity, all versus brands and advertisers. But rather than me drive, what I'd love to do is pause here and turn it over to Floor to ask any questions. We could look into the data together.
Yeah, and Sally has a comment in the chat that she would have thought that agencies would be using AI for media planning and buying by definition, as AI builds on the programmatic platforms of a decade ago.
Right. Well, I'll show you what we see here. So if I compare, let me just make sure I got the right thing. Yep. If I compare agencies, all right, let's not worry about it. I can see what I have all the agencies. It's just giving me the roles that I've got selected. Agencies are on the left, and on the right, so I have publishers. Just to juxtapose the folks that are generally buying media from the folks that are generally selling media. And you can see here that ad measurement, media planning are, well, ad measurement, I would think both publishers and agencies are doing, but obviously we're not doing so much media planning on the publisher side. But on the agency side, you see that ad measurement and media planning are fourth and fifth down the line. And in fact, on media planning, nobody on the agency side is calling themselves at a maturity level of delivering actual ROI.
This idea of, you know, marketing agencies using AI, they can boast about it in general terms on the one end, but then, they probably have to, if they're smart about it, get some sort of agreement with every client. What these are the AI, these are the AI agents we use, and maybe how we do it, something like that. And you know, uh, we think it'll work for you. But then there's going to be reservations from company to company, right? And so there's going to be some agreement, and then there's the companies are going to have their own ideas about which ones they're most comfortable with. So um, I guess I'm wondering, like how that's handled, or is there any knowledge about that?
So are you asking, Christian, how are the agencies mm, coordinating with their clients on which tools are authorized and which tools should not be used?
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, I mean, tools, methodologies, any of that, because they can boast, "Oh, we're so mature on this," but the client, they're taking the lead from the client in every case. So if the client says, "Oh no, we're not," we don't like ChatGPT. We think the output's terrible. We like Claude, or we like DeepSeek, or whatever. Um, you know, everybody's got a lot of feelings about AI, and everybody's very nervous. And so you can boast how mature you are, but that's according to you, right? That's just self-reporting. So maybe there's some information about, and it's probably early days. I'm sure it is, but some information about what they do to get a sign off from the client, or just take the client's lead in terms of, oh, the client thinks that the client trusts Gemini, fine, we'll trust Gemini and run our stuff with Gemini because our methods are tool agnostic and something like that.
Yeah. So we did ask each respondent for the tools that they're generally using. And again, this was a Q1 survey, and ChatGPT dominated as the default entry point with Claude and Gemini behind them. I have a feeling post everything that happened with the federal government and the change in branding after the Super Bowl with Claude, I have a feeling that we'd see a different answer today. But within the agencies themselves, agencies reported the widest tool diversity um, across all kinds of different functions. They reported LLMs, the obvious choices, meeting assistants, synthetic personas, platforms for figuring out personas, for figuring out how to get to a readiness for a change from traditional search to AI overviews. And then they had a couple of the larger, the holding companies were developing their own hubs. So I think, Christian, to your point, there's probably a recognition that not all clients are going to be comfortable with all tools, which is why they have such a wide diversity of tools in house. But I don't know the actual process uh, for getting approval or validation with the client base. In the survey tool itself, which you can get access to, you can read through not only the summary by company type, but individual responses by company type to what they're using. And I think you'll see that the the diversity within the agents is pretty strong.
Okay, thanks. I just when marketers market themselves,
Mhm.
I'm leery. That's all.
When marketers market themselves, or when agencies market themselves.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Agencies market themselves, and marketers like me marketing myself is terrible. I get terrible. It's terrible. I don't trust any marketer to market themselves. Every marketer needs a marketer to market the other person. So
Got it.
that's it. Thanks.
Hey, David, it's Brooke Pitts. If you can hear me, I just wanted to ask a follow-on question or share a thought on this. It's specific to the media planning and the ad measurement. I'm kind of thinking again, these barriers specific to agencies. Why are they not? Is it barriers on the client side? I would expect the agencies to be creating use cases, case studies that really demonstrate how using AI, the way they're using it, the tools, regardless of the tools they're using, but with their methodologies, that how it is driving marketing performance, how it is delivering ROI, and use that as a sales tool. I'd be shocked if they aren't doing that. I haven't really seen it yet, but I guess nested in there is my question is like if agencies aren't kind of wrapping around certain platforms and tools for media planning and ad measurement, why is that? Maybe they are, but it looks a little nebulous.
Yeah, I don't have a really good reason why agencies aren't further ahead on ad measurement and then using the ad measurement for planning and buying decisions. Brooke, it does sort of seem intuitive to me that that should be front and center, particularly for media agencies, which I'm sure many of these agencies are. Um, I have a theory on that coming out of TrustX. For those of you who don't know, I ran an ad tech platform for almost 10 years before I came back to my consulting business in Morgan Digital. My theory on this is that it's actually harder than we all believe to get a hold of the raw data to then use in the AI models for things like measurement, analysis, and optimization. And so it's very possible that the agencies would like to be further ahead here. But I mean, I will tell you that we made our raw data at TrustX available to all our clients, whether you're a buyer or a seller. But very few clients actually ask for it because it's just a massive amount of data. And two, at the time, they didn't know what they could do with it because they didn't have the power of LLMs. So now we have the power of an analysis tool where I can chuck the data into Claude or otherwise and say, hey, tell me X, Y, and Z. But it's still a massive amount of data and it's still hard to get at the data because most ad tech companies are not like TrustX was, where we freely would give access to the data. So, Brooke, I'm not sure if that's the answer, but it is a theory as to why folks are further behind on measurement and then using the measurement for optimization and planning.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I come from a financial services background, it's highly regulated. So getting the lower funnel data, that's where there are certainly barriers, right? The agency is going to get, ad response, but often, combining that with what happens afterwards is difficult.
Yep.
But
I will say something about the marketers uh, through anecdotal discussions. Marketers that are in a direct to consumer or direct to customer type of environment. So folks in retail, folks that are OEMs that sell directly on their sites or that frequently have engagement directly within their own environments. Those are the organizations that I think could very easily put AI to work to get ahead on things like who are the personas, who's coming to my site, how do I use that data to improve the odds of or improve the effectiveness and efficiency of my marketing. In other words, the marketers have the ability to take some of this on by themselves, even if the agencies don't have the data with which to do it, or for whatever reason aren't doing it. And I feel like it's a miss. I feel like the marketing segment, the actual advertisers aren't embracing some of these capabilities, which are now feasible and easier to do because you always had the data, but now you have a tool set that allows you to make a human query, and that query can give you some really insightful results.
David, this is great. I have a metaphysical question. I just wanted to focus in on that 81%, which you said on the company side, the biggest obstacle, skills, budget. I guess my question is why? I mean, if you have any more insights, because I imagine so many when you talk to people on the client side, CEOs, et cetera, top down want to make AI in a focus, but is it I can understand the skill sets not being there, but are they not investing the dollars? Is it just a paper tiger? Curious on your thoughts on that.
So I don't really have a good answer to your question as much as I would love to have had a good answer to your question. We do have a summary next steps as part of this tool. And again, you can look at it either by individual responses or by summary by company type. And it does talk about what the companies want to do. There's also on this, sorry, it's the priorities tab where folks are making planned investments. So here you have how you're measuring, and here you have, and I'll put back more of the responses. Planned investments in more automation, in building products. Sorry, strategic priorities there, and the investments in business development strategy. But here again, sorry to keep coming back to this ad measurement. I'm so surprised how low on the list investments in ad measurement are when we saw previously that that's an area where it's kind of, in my view, behind the times. So I unfortunately, Barry, I don't have the answer to why, but we can at least see what the strategic priorities and plan investments are between this screen and maybe by reading some of the next steps.
I'm just curious, this follow up. How often do you plan on updating this? It's fair. A year from now, or even 6 months from now, it may be different once people kind of catch up to their aspirations.
I am thinking of doing it in another, like for Q3. This was the Q1 survey. Let's let it roll for 6 months and do another one. I probably will do it. It's not all that complicated and expensive, but it does take a lot of time. We definitely had between David and I in marketing. Although for those of you who responded or on this call, we're grateful and appreciative. So thank you for that.
Yeah, on the topic of continuing the survey into Q3, the one thing I was interested in, I was surprised not to see more media planning usage for this. I'm wondering if it might be better to separate planning from buying / activation, because especially at the holding companies and the large independents, those are two different teams. And I think that, from a buying standpoint, there's probably a lot more accessibility to things that might help you buy one channel or one provider versus another. Whereas on the media planning front, there's a little bit of mixing chemicals between strategy and planning, and those lines always blur. So it's probably harder for them to nail down AI solutions in that area just yet. Although I am seeing it, especially at the holding companies, they do have their own internal platforms, and they're giving the strategists and the planners plenty of tools to use. Whether or not they are using them to full advantage or not is another question.
Walt, I think that's an excellent idea. And I would actually do it three ways. I think I'd have media planning separate from media buying and separate from measurement. And I think that it's likely by Q3 we'll see further maturity on all of that. But what I'm really interested in finding out in Q3 is how much folks are actually using agents, which were just a theoretical idea in Q1. But I think by Q3 we'll see some real agentic buying going on. And Walt, I'm going to call you so you can do this with us next time.
Awesome.
You'll help us set this up. I would appreciate the input on little subtleties.
Looking forward to it.
There's another question from Sally in terms of any stats in the study regarding the human decision making and problem solving aspect, and perhaps teams can agree on how to use AI effectively in media planning.
It's a great question. Sally, do you want to add a little color to that? I want to make sure I'm really focusing on what you're asking.
Sure. And I am not a media planner, but I've done a lot of B2B marketing for the creative and media space. And as I was writing to David the other day, having done a lot of strategic discovery sessions with corporate teams, to then produce brand positioning and content and marketing, usually people on an executive team don't always agree, right? They come with a completely different perspective. Like the tech guy might have one idea and the saleswoman has, a completely other idea on, a priority, for example, any generic priority. And so I guess that was kind of driving the question was, and I think somebody else mentioned it too, Matthew, kind of in his comment, are people just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, like just make my life easier? In the absence of being able to agree, like, wow, this is really what this can do for our company or our category, in this case, media planning.
Yep. Let me show you two slices of the data that may help us see some answers. I don't have the direct answer, but let's look at some data together.
Cool.
The first one is what I've got on screen now, which is generally segment maturity by role. And the roles are not radically different. Yes, the marketing and media leadership. So these are people who day to day are in that function. Rate themselves maybe a little lower on the curve relative to let's call the executive management team. I'll put the two top bars, founders and executive management together, and then the two on the bottom, product and sales. So there's a little bit of, maybe the folks that are day to day are more realistic about where they are, or more because they're in the weeds. They're seeing the maturity better than the other folks on the team. That's a possibility. I'm just showing you the data. We're making up ideas. But then let's go to something that could be a little more interesting here. So I'm going to put on the left, just because we're heavy here on marketers and we're talking about agencies, this is the comparison of all the functions. On the left are agencies, on the right are brands. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select executive management and founders on the left.
Wow.
And I'm going to put in marketing and media leadership on the right. And let's just see what the data shows us.
Huh.
So the data is showing us that the executive teams feel like they're further along on maturity related to content. So using AI to generate content to help with strategic decision making and strategic planning. And their view is that marketing ops is getting real returns on investments. Let's look at the same three on the right. The people that actually do this every day, marketing and media leadership, these are people that are said they're in the day-to-day marketing or media functions. And this is inside advertisers. Ooh, let's do this. Let's look at it first in the same kind of company. So this is folks at the executive level in the agencies versus folks who do it every day in the marketing and media departments at agencies. So that's kind of an interesting view.
Yeah.
And now let's look. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I had the wrong filter on. This is the agency. Oh, that's because N equals 1. There was only one person in the agency that called themselves marketing and media leadership, probably because they figured that means a marketer side. So maybe the better is here. Let's do this. You'll have to excuse as I move my cursor around. I'm trying to find a good comparison. Yeah. So here on the left, you have the agencies, and on the right, you have brands. But you have people in marketing at brands, and at the agency side, I'm looking at people on call themselves the leadership team. And since it's an agency, they're all in media. So, I'm not saying I know an answer, but I'm showing you that the data shows some really interesting opinions that are different between different people in the organization.
There's still a lot of people not using it for strategy.
Yeah. On the strategy, the N equals 1. There's only one person who's getting delivery on ROI. When we had 10 respondents in this category, so 10%. You guys can see my cursor, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you had the N equals 10 and only one respondent said. Most say that we're in the implementation category, which is the blue. I really encourage everyone to to it's a link, you can get it online, but to play with this. I gotta tell you, there's so many slices here that, and I've played with it now for a month. I discover stuff all the time just by looking at the data. I think that's sort of the fascinating. We could juxtapose these two. Yeah, again, if you do marketing and agencies together, you get a more interesting view.
Where can we find this?
Dave, will you resend the link
yeah.
at the end?
Yeah, I would put that in here. Yeah.
Dave, it's Brooke again. Just a reaction to this is really interesting, by the way, and to dive in a little further. But in the future, if there are a way to um, make sure on the brand side that you have brand advertisers, who follow a traditional model, rely on their agency partners versus, a subset who run their media planning and buying and measurement in house. That may be more B2B, but it struck me as that might be interesting to see, kind of that lens. That may be further down the road, but I know I would find that interesting.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
We had I think we had 15 brands. Let me see what's the end here. 11 out. Oh no, wait, hold on. So I had some filters. 12 out of the 55 were called themselves brand advertiser. But Brooke, we don't know how many of those were in-house versus more traditional agency model. We didn't ask the question. It's a great question to ask.
And I was just wondering, and you don't have to say this if this is proprietary. I'm a Publicis Group veteran. If any Publicis media folks, because Publicis Group is so laser focused on using technology and having and doing projects with them recently, I'm just sort of surprised. That's all.
Yeah, Sally, we collected the data anonymously on purpose to ensure that folks would be brutally honest.
Makes
Which
sense.
is why I was a little surprised about the agencies putting themselves up at the top. I figured if they're being really honest, they wouldn't drink the Kool-Aid in the survey. So I don't know who responded. With a very small number of exceptions, we got a handful of folks who put their name on the list to get a preview. But none of the folks on the preview list had a Publicis email address.
Wow, this is a super neat.
Very cool.
Yeah.
By the way, not for nothing, but I am not a software engineer. I know shit about that. And I said, all right, I'm going to use the tools. And so I fired up Claude and I said, here are the results. I'm trying to create a tool. And what you see on screen was probably about 2 to 3 hours of work total. The initial tool took about 15 minutes. And then there was some tweaking. And then I learned how to get it on my website. And then I learned how to change the colors. And I learned how to create the comparison view. But all of it was Claude teaching me and doing it for me. So for those of you who haven't experimented, a total non-techie developer, non-developer, non-techie, was able to do this. So I'm pretty impressed with Claude for that.
Was this Claude Code or just like
No, it was just
our $20 a month version?
$20 a month.
What did you upload? A spreadsheet?
What? Sorry, what was the question, Karen?
What was the source? Was it a spreadsheet?
Yeah, so we did the survey in Typeform, and Typeform gives you the ability to download all the results in CSV, especially, basically a spreadsheet. And I was really having trouble in the initial analysis trying to slice and dice it because it's multidimensional, right? You have functions. These are the different kinds of respondents here. And so I turned to Claude and I said, here's what I'm trying to do. And I said, well, think of this. I'm like, I love you, man.
I just did a similar project. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. My BFF.
David, I just want to share one other thought as you plan for your next rev of this. Sounds like it's quarterly basis. Is I don't know if you looked into this, but for recruiting, some of the groups within like the ANA, Association of National Advertisers, they have an AI marketers group, and they obviously have digital media groups, and they might have an interest in not only results but getting their kind of brand partners to participate. I think it's great what you built, and love to see this evolve.
Thank you. I'm not going to knock any particular trade association, but
That was just an example.
I reached out to them all, and some were like, "Oh, absolutely, we'll be happy to send a note out and get people in. We'd love to see the results." And some were like, "Oh, we don't do that." It doesn't make sense to me because I think this is insightful, and I appreciate everyone on this call agreeing. But we had a mixed reviews from my friends in the trade associations.
Huh.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to show one more thing before we break. Let me just
Yeah.
put one screen up online. And I think this is really important for folks on this call to think about. I said earlier that what gets measured gets done. Before I created TrustX in 2016, I spent 25 years in management consulting at Ernst & Young and Price Waterhouse. And, our pedigree was what I'm doing now, Morgan Digital, which is to help companies differentiate and grow. And we used to use a model that's kind of like this, and I'll explain it. It's obviously tuned to AI, but the titles on the bottom could be any transformational technology, and it's really looking at if there's a catalyst, if there's something happening in the market. So the something now is AI and agentic. You kind of look at what's available right now that we know works, what's coming soon, and what's in the future. So that's the green circle on the right. And again, we could have called it AI, we could have called it programmatic, which is what we were calling it 10 years ago. It could have been digital, 20 years ago. On the left is value drivers for your business. It's how you differentiate, it's how you get ahead, it's how you drive growth. And there's the high value differentiators, the medium and the low. And what we do, and my consultancy does at Morgan Digital, and what I used to do in my days at PwC and EY, is you look for that red star right at the top. And you say, if I know this technology is capable, and if I can apply it right here in this high value area, I can get ahead. And my most frustrating takeaway from doing this survey is that very few companies were looking for where their red circle, where the red star is. They're looking at agentic, they're looking at AI, they're throwing spaghetti against the wall, but they're really not thinking about it as a strategic imperative to get ahead. Thankfully, I have some clients who are paying me to do that, but the market was not really doing it on their own. So I kind of leave you today with this picture and say, think about this in your businesses. How do I merge the capabilities with what's going to drive growth in my company?
Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what this is all about, and is why we have folks like you here to help us figure that out.
Again, I encourage everyone to sign up, get the tool. And if you see something in the data that we didn't cover, or that you just are like, wow, this is really interesting, have you thought about it? Send David and me, send us a note and say, hey, have you thought about this? Because, everybody looks at this stuff differently, and we're always looking for insights. So we appreciate your feedback to help us learn more.
For sure. Well, appreciate all this, David, and appreciate all the thoughtful questions as always. And and you have this survey link, and I share David's LinkedIn as well. So hopefully I'll can get in touch with just further thoughts and questions and just ways to evolve this further. And so appreciate everyone coming on. And we've got things scheduled now through the end of June. So some terrific sessions coming up. Also, let me know if anyone's going to be at Possible. I'll be there with Marketecture this year, and look forward to seeing you next week and beyond. So thanks, everyone.